I can't tell you why it took me so long to pick up Junji Ito, but I am so glad that I did because holy cow. My goodness. Hi guys, it's April and I have 3 collections of Junji Ito that I want to talk to you guys about today. Lovesickness just came out recently and I've been slowly collecting his works in anticipation of like binge reading through a whole bunch of them. And so since I've got Lovesickness, I decided that I was also going to pick up Shiver and Smashed because I figured the best way to get into his work was to just pick up a whole bunch of his short stories. And now I got some words. Like I said, this is my first foray into his works. This is actually my first dive into some very graphic horror in the manga genre. Let me start at the beginning. First, I picked up Shiver. This is a story collection that I think out of the 3, these 3 is probably by far my favorite and the one that just creeped me out the most. This short story collection kind of picks at all of those little phobias you have, all of those little squirm moments that you can develop in the horror genre. And you can tell at this point that he is really starting to find his voice in the horror genre. He has made a lot of impact in it in general, but I feel like Shiver is just the one that leaves a mark on your soul. There is a short story in here called, I believe it's Greased, that by far left me in a place of pure uncomfortableness. He had a way of drawing and making you feel just the sludge and the of that story. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it is a story that I then couldn't stop thinking about. Made eating dinner very uncomfortable for me. And to this day, after reading all 3 of these collections, that is the story that has stuck with me the most. Each of the stories in Shiver, I have to say, have moments of that kind of surreality and just grossness and uncomfortableness. There is also one that deals with this jade figurine and holes, and I don't know how this man does it, but he now has a place in my horror collection, and I am going to attempt to collect all of his works. I also like this volume because it does have author notes in it, which I didn't notice in the other 2 collections. At the end of each short story, there's a little blurb about where the story came from, and then there's also a picture of his notes that are translated. This volume, I absolutely adore this volume. This is the volume that I think I'm going to recommend to anybody who wants to get into horror manga, who can stomach horror, because this one is the one that had a lasting impact on me. Now, Smashed. I did enjoy Smashed. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I enjoyed Shiver. Shiver just has this place in my brain that just, it won't let go. But it's still, you can see his early thought processes in this volume. There are a lot of character designs that you can see that morph between each of these stories. And here in this story collection, you actually see a continuation that you didn't necessarily get in Shiver. So here you've got a couple of stories that actually are related to each other, which I found interesting. I also like some of the takes that Junji Ito does with mental disorders and other ailments such as that. The first story in this actually deals with eating disorders, and I kind of like how he tied in some thoughts. But I do have to say there are more stories in this one that just kind of felt very generic to the horror genre, but I still really like his drawing style, and I feel like that adds to the richness and the darkness of these stories. And then finally, last but not least, we have the newest volume, Lovesickness. This one, the majority of this is actually about a town that is covered in fog. There's several continuing storylines throughout this one that deals with this town and how people like to stand on corners and ask the first passerby for their fortune. And it ties up into this very unfortunate story about love and the misuse of love and pining after the unattainable. And I did find that story interesting. It just feels like the additional stories added at the end don't quite tie into the concept of the rest of these. I almost feel like that could have been its own little bind up in itself, because also added into this, there are a couple stories about the sibling set. I don't feel segued correctly, because in the other short stories, Shiver particularly, I can understand why they were grouped together. Smashed, because they were all separated except for a couple of them, it kind of made sense why that story collection was put together. This one, however, with how much the first story about the foggy fortunes, how much of that segment takes up in this, it's, I believe, what is it? Where does it end? Yeah, there's like 5 stories dealing with that town, and it's over half of this volume. If you had separated that out, I think that would have been good, and then the others could have come together in their own little segment. And then at the end, there was this weird story about poop that I don't feel like was a full thought. It could have been a full thought, and it just wasn't. Still really like his style. Still really like what he is doing in the horror genre. I am definitely going to be picking up all of his works and reading through them. So, with that being said, tell me down below if you have read anything by him, what your favorite is, what you recommend for me picking up next, because like I said, I am going to make my way through all of his work at this point, because yes, please. And if you want to see me go through all of those works, I recommend that you subscribe down below, hit that bell to get all of those notifications. Please come on this journey with me. It is so much fun, and it's just a squeam fest, and I enjoy it so much. And of course, as always, I heart your beautiful faces. Bye.